What if everything you watched in the final episode of Stranger Things was a lie? Not a metaphor, not a theory, a literal, manufactured illusion designed to make you believe the story ended when it never really did. That final shot of the kids graduating, moving on with their lives, finding peace after years of trauma and terror. What if none of it was real? This isn't just another fan theory born from disappointment or wishful thinking. This is something darker. Something the show itself might be telling us if we know where to look. And once you see what thousands of viewers have already noticed, you won't be able to unsee it. The finale of Stranger Things might be the most disturbing episode ever created, not because of what happens on screen, but because of what it hides beneath the surface. Let's start with something simple. Something everyone felt, but couldn't quite name. The finale felt wrong. Not bad. Wrong. After 4 seasons of escalating dread, impossible choices, and devastating consequences, the 8th episode gave us something Stranger Things has never given us before. A clean ending. Everyone survives. Everyone heals. Everyone graduates and moves forward into normal lives. The upside down is sealed. Vecna is defeated. Hawkins is safe. Roll credits. But Stranger Things doesn't do clean endings. It does cliffhangers. It does unresolved mysteries. It does shadows that linger long after the lights come back on. So why did this finale feel like a network sitcom wrapping up its final season? Why did it feel so artificial? The answer might be simpler and more horrifying than anyone imagined. What if the finale wasn't showing us the real world at all? What if it was showing us a dream? A simulation? A false reality constructed by the very villain we thought had been defeated? This is the Vecna illusion theory. And it suggests that everything we saw in that final episode, everything that felt too neat, too resolved, too perfect, was never meant to be believed. It was meant to trap us, just like it trapped the characters. Let's talk about what we know for certain about Vecna. Henry Creel wasn't just powerful. He was a reality manipulator. He didn't just kill people. He pulled them into psychological prisons built from their own memories, their own guilt, their own worst fears. He could construct entire worlds inside someone's mind. He could make them believe they were somewhere safe while he slowly destroyed them from within. Now imagine that power on a larger scale. Not just one person trapped in a vision, but everyone, an entire town, an entire narrative, an entire audience. The theory states that Vecna was never truly defeated. That final battle, where Eleven seemingly overpowers him and the kids manage to seal the gates, was either staged or happened exactly as Vecna wanted it to. Because the real plan wasn't to win through force. It was to win through deception. To let everyone believe they had triumphed, so they would lower their guard, so they would accept the false reality he was about to create. And then he built them a world. A world where everything turned out okay. A world where trauma could be healed with time and therapy. A world where Max woke up from her coma just in time for graduation. A world where buyers finally seemed at peace. A world where Hawkins could rebuild and move on. A world that feels like a television finale, because that's exactly what it is. A scripted ending. A simulation. A lie. The first clue that something was deeply wrong appeared in the graduation scene. Fans watching closely noticed something odd about the way people were standing. Multiple background characters. Students who should have been celebrating, laughing, moving naturally, were frozen in strange poses. Their hands were positioned in ways that seemed deliberate, symmetrical, unnatural, and then someone realized what those hand positions resembled. They looked like Vecna's signature pose. The same clawed, outstretched fingers he uses when he invades someone's mind. The same gesture that has become synonymous with his control over reality. It wasn't just one person. It was scattered throughout the scene. As if Vecna's influence was bleeding through the illusion. As if the simulation couldn't quite hide the truth of who was really in control. But it gets stranger. The graduation gowns were orange. Bright, unmissable, overwhelming orange. Now, color symbolism has always been important in Stranger Things. The upside down is bathed in sickly greens and reds. The mind flayer is associated with shadow and storm. And orange has been used throughout the series as a warning color. A danger signal. the color of fire, of infection, of something spreading that shouldn't be there. So why would the creators choose to dress every single graduating student in the same color that has consistently represented threat and contamination? Unless it was intentional. Unless it was meant to signal that something about this scene, this moment, this entire reality was wrong. Then there are the books. In one brief shot during the finale, we see a collection of Dungeons and Dragons manuals on a shelf. The same game that has been the narrative backbone of the entire series. The game that gave us the vocabulary for the Upside Down, for the Mind Flayer, for Vecna himself. Fans examining this shot noticed something impossible to ignore. The spines of the books, when read in sequence, appeared to spell out a message. Not clearly, not obviously, but with just enough intention that it couldn't be coincidence. Xa lie. The X dimension is a lie. The 10th dimension, the final layer, the place where the story supposedly ended, except it didn't end. It was fabricated, a lie told through the language of the game itself, hidden in plain sight for anyone paying close enough attention. Now, you might be thinking this is reaching, that fans are seeing patterns where none exist. That grief over the show ending is causing people to invent mysteries that aren't there. But consider this. Stranger Things has always rewarded close attention. It has always buried clues in background details, in musical choices, in visual callbacks that only make sense seasons later. The Duffer Brothers have built their reputation on layered storytelling and hidden meanings. So when thousands of viewers independently notice the same anomalies, the same inconsistencies, the same feeling that something fundamental is wrong with finale, maybe that's not delusion. Maybe that's exactly what we're supposed to feel. Because if Vecna's final move was to trap everyone in a false reality, the only way to escape would be to realize you're trapped, to notice the cracks, to see through the illusion. And maybe that's what these clues are. Not evidence of sloppy production or wishful thinking, but breadcrumbs. A trail left behind by a show that refuses to end the way we think it did. Let's talk about Max Mayfield, because her presence in that graduation scene might be the most damning evidence that the finale isn't real. Max, who spent nearly 2 years in a coma after Vecna broke her mind and shattered her body. Max, whose eyes were destroyed, whose limbs were snapped, whose consciousness was pulled into the darkest corners of the Upside Down. Max, who by all medical and narrative logic should not have recovered in time to graduate with her class. But there she is, walking, talking, smiling, standing among her friends as if the trauma that nearly killed her was nothing more than a bad dream. No extended rehabilitation, no visible scars, no psychological aftermath that would realistically follow that level of violation. She's just fine, ready to move on, ready to graduate. This isn't how trauma works. This isn't how Stranger Things has ever worked. The show has always been unflinching in its portrayal of consequences. Barbara Holland didn't get to come back. Bob Newby died saving the people he loved. Eddie Munson sacrificed himself and was never clear of the crimes he didn't commit. The series has built an emotional weight on the reality that not everyone makes out alive, and those who do carry permanent wounds. So why would Max be different? Why would she, of all people, get a complete recovery that defies both medical science and the show's own internal rules about cost and consequence? Unless a recovery isn't real, unless what we're seeing is a dream version of Max, constructed by someone who needs her to be whole because the illusion requires it. A world where Max is broken doesn't feel like an ending. A world where she's healed does. Even if that healing is impossible. Vecna would know this. He spent enough time inside Max's mind to understand exactly what she feared, what she hoped for, what she needed to believe in order to accept a false reality as true. He would know that seeing her recover will be the final emotional piece that makes everyone, characters and audience alike, accept the lie. Because we want her to be okay. We need her to be okay. So we don't question how it happened. We just accept it. But acceptance is exactly what the illusion requires. The moment you stop questioning, the moment you choose to believe because belief is easier than doubt, you're caught. You're in Vecna's world. And you don't even know it. Now let's examine the tonal shift in the final episode. Stranger Things has always walked a careful line between hope and horror. Even in its lightest moments, there's an undercurrent of dread, a sense that safety is temporary and darkness is always waiting. The show teaches us to never trust a happy moment because it's usually the setup for something terrible. But the finale abandons that tension entirely. It gives us scene after scene of resolution without complication. Characters make peace with their trauma. Relationships that were fractured are suddenly healed. The town that should be reeling from unexplained deaths and dimensional rifts is just rebuilding, moving on, forgetting. This isn't how the show has ever operated. So either the creators fundamentally misunderstood their own narrative in the final hour, or they're showing us something that isn't meant to be taken at face value. A reality that's too smooth because it's been smoothed over. A narrative that's too complete because someone is controlling the narrative. Think about every season finale before this one. Season 1 ended with 11 seemingly dead and with coughing up slugs in the bathroom, proving the Upside Down wasn't done with him. Season 2 ended with the Mind Flayer still looming over Hawkins, watching and waiting. Season 3 ended with Hopper presumed dead and a post-credit scene revealing Russians have a captive Demogorgon. Season 4, Part 1, ended with Max in a coma and the Upside Down bleeding into Hawkins in ways that couldn't be reversed. Every single ending left us with questions, with threats, with the certainty that the story wasn't over. And then suddenly, inexplicably, the series finale tells us everything is resolved. The gates are closed. The danger is gone. Life continues. It's not just unsatisfying. It's narratively inconsistent, unless the inconsistency is the point. Unless we're meant to feel that something is off because something is off, the story isn't over. We're just being told it is. There's another detail that fans have fixated on, something subtle but impossible to ignore once you see it. Several characters in the finale have hairstyles that seem to mirror Vecna's appearance. The way their hair falls, the angles it creates, small visual echoes that shouldn't be there, but are, as if Vecna's presence is literally written into the way people look, as if the simulation is subtly marking everyone with his signature, claiming them as part of his construct. This is a technique the show has used before. When it was possessed by the Mind Flayer in Season 2, there were visual cues throughout the season that signaled his connection to the Upside Down, the way shadows fell on him, the colors that surrounded him, the subtle glitches in his behavior that told us something was wrong long before the possession was revealed. So when we see these same kinds of visual markers appearing in the finale, scattered across multiple characters, it's worth asking what they mean. Are these just stylistic choices? Or are they clues embedded in the cinematography, telling us that everyone in this finale is under someone's control? And then there's Will Byers. Will, who has been connected to the Upside Down since the very first episode. Will, who still feels the presence of Vecna, who still experiences unexplained sensations that suggest his link to that world was never truly severed. In earlier episodes, we were told that Will's connection makes him sensitive to the Mind Flayer's presence, that he can sense when the Upside Down is active, when danger is near. But in the finale, Will seems calm, at peace. He shows no signs of distress, no indication that anything is wrong. And that, more than anything, should alarm us. Because if the Upside Down is truly sealed, if Vecna is truly defeated, Will should feel that absence. He should comment on it. He should express relief that the sensation is finally gone. But he doesn't. He just exists, as if the connection is still there, but he's been told not to notice it, as if his awareness has been suppressed by the very reality he's living in. Because if Will started questioning, if he started sensing that something was wrong, the illusion would crack. And Vecna can't allow that. If you enjoyed what you're hearing so far, if these connections are starting to make sense in ways that feel both exciting and deeply unsettling, consider leaving a like on this video. Not because I need the engagement, but because it tells me you're ready to go deeper, that you want to keep pulling at these threads until we unravel the truth together. The theory extends beyond visual clues and tonal inconsistencies. It reaches into the meta-narrative of the show itself. Stranger Things has always been a story about stories, about how we use fiction to process fear, about how Dungeons and Dragons became a framework for understanding the impossible. The characters don't just fight monsters, they fight narratives. They fight the stories they've been told about who they are and what they're capable of. So what happens when the ultimate villain, the one who has mastered the art of mental manipulation and false realities, turns the entire show into his own game? What happens when he becomes a dungeon master? When he decides how the story ends, regardless of what the heroes do? That's the nightmare scenario the theory proposes. Not that Vecna won through strength, but that he won through authorship. He wrote them a satisfying ending. He gave them the graduation, the healing, the sense of closure they desperately wanted. And in doing so, he trapped them in a story they would never want to leave. A prison disguised as paradise. A lie disguised as truth. Here's where the theory gets truly disturbing. Because if the finale is an illusion, it raises one inevitable question. When did the illusion start? Was it just the final episode? Or has it been longer? Could parts of Season 4, or even earlier, already be showing us a false reality we accepted as true? Consider the mechanics of how Vecna's powers work. When he pulls someone into a vision, they don't immediately realize they're trapped. The vision begins with something familiar, something that feels safe. It's only as the illusion progresses that the horror reveals itself, that the victim realizes they're not where they think they are. The transitions are seamless. Reality bleeds into nightmare without a clear boundary. Now apply that structure to the show itself. What if the moment Vecna truly gained control wasn't the finale? What if it was earlier? What if the reason we didn't notice the shift is because we, like the characters, were already inside the illusion before we knew to look for the signs? Some fans have suggested that the turning point was the moment Max died, or appeared to die, during the final confrontation with Vecna in Season 4. In that moment, her heart stopped. Her consciousness was pulled into Vecna's domain. And yes, 11 brought her back, pulled her out of that darkness and restarted her heart. But what if she didn't bring back all of Max? What if she brought back a version of Max that Vecna allowed her to retrieve? A Max who was already compromised, already part of the illusion he was building? If that's true, then everything after that moment, every episode, every scene, every resolution, has been playing out inside a constructed reality. One where the characters believe they're still fighting, still winning, still in control. When the truth is they lost the moment they thought they'd won. This interpretation reframes the entire final battle. It wasn't about defeating Vecna. It was about walking into his trap. He let them think they were heroes storming the castle when they were really prisoners walking into their cells. And the cell he built for them was so comfortable, so convincing, that they never thought to question whether the walls were real. There's a concept in philosophy and fiction called the Lotus Eater machine. It's a trap that works by giving its victims exactly what they want most. A perfect world, a happy ending, peace after conflict. The trap doesn't use pain or fear. It uses satisfaction. It uses the deep human need for resolution. And once you're inside, you don't want to leave, because leaving means acknowledging that the happiness you feel isn't real. It means choosing harsh truth over beautiful lies. Vecna would understand this. He spent enough time inside people's minds to know that fear isn't the only weapon. Hope can be just as paralyzing, especially false hope, especially when it's wrapped in the exact ending everyone wanted but no one truly earned. The show has explored this idea before. In Season 2, when Will was possessed, the Mind Flayer tried to convince him that his family, his friends, everyone he loved was the enemy. It tried to invert his reality, to make him believe that safety was danger and danger was safety. The only way Will broke free was by recognizing a lie, by holding on to something true even when everything around him was telling him otherwise. So maybe that's what we're being asked to do now, to recognize the lie, to see the finale not as an ending but as a test, one we're failing every time we accept it at face value. Let's examine some of the specific plot points that feel inconsistent or unexplained. The Upside Down, we're told, is sealed. The gates are closed. Vecna's connection to our world has been severed. But the show established that the Upside Down isn't just a place. It's a dimension, a living ecosystem that has been slowly merging with Hawkins for years. You don't just close that. You don't reverse that kind of dimensional contamination with a single battle and a group of teenagers, no matter how powerful 11 is. Yet, That's what we're asked to believe. That the fundamental threat, the one that has been building since episode 1 of season 1, is just gone, resolved, fixed, and life goes on. It doesn't make sense within the show's own logic, unless the logic has been rewritten, unless we're now operating under new rules set by someone who benefits from us believing the threat is over. Then there's the matter of the government, the military, the larger world that should be reacting to what happened in Hawkins. A small town experienced multiple interdimensional breaches, unexplained deaths, and visible rifts in reality. That's not something that gets covered up or forgotten. That's an international incident. That's the kind of thing that would bring in more than just Owens and his small team. That would reshape how humanity understands reality itself. But none of that happens. The world just continues. Hawkins rebuilds quietly. No one seems to remember or care about the magnitude of what occurred. It's as if the entire event has been memory holed. Not through conspiracy, but through narrative convenience. Again, unless memory is being controlled. Unless everyone's perception of what happened, what matters, what's real, has been adjusted by someone with the power to do so. Someone who needs a world to forget, so his illusion can persist. If you're starting to see how deep this goes, if you're realizing that every piece of evidence compounds on the others until the theory becomes harder to dismiss than to accept, then you're exactly where you need to be. This is a moment where you decide whether you want the comfortable lie or the disturbing truth. And if you choose truth, if you choose to keep questioning, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel. Because what comes next, the deeper we go into this theory, is going to challenge everything you thought you understood about the show. And I don't want you to miss it. Let's talk about the absence of certain characters in the finale. Where was Dr. Owens? Where was Murray? Where were the government agents who have been present, in some capacity, in every major event in Season 1? These are people who would not simply disappear when the story reached its conclusion. They would have roles to play in the aftermath, in the rebuilding, in ensuring that what happened to Hawkins never happens again. But they're not there. Or if they are, they're reduced to background noise, functionally irrelevant to the narrative. The show, which has always been careful about tracking its characters and giving them meaningful arcs, suddenly forgets about people who should matter, unless they were written out because their presence would create questions the illusion can't answer, unless their skepticism, their knowledge, their connection to the broader world would expose the false reality for what it is. Vecna would know who to exclude. He would understand that certain people are too aware, too connected to the truth, to be safely included in his construct. So he removes them, not violently, just narratively. They simply aren't part of the story anymore because their presence threatens the story he's telling. The selective amnesia extends to the town itself. Hawkins suffered massive casualties. People died in ways that should have traumatized the entire community. Yet in the finale, life seems almost normal. People are out in public. Businesses are open. There's a graduation ceremony with hundreds of attendees who all seem remarkably unbothered by the recent apocalyptic events. Real communities don't recover that quickly. Real trauma doesn't heal in time for a neat ending. But fictional trauma does. Television trauma does. The kind of trauma that exists only to be resolved within the runtime of a final episode. And that's the key insight. The finale doesn't feel like reality. It feels like television. Like a scripted ending designed to satisfy audience expectations rather than honor narrative truth. Which makes perfect sense if the finale is literally a script. A false narrative projected into the minds of everyone involved, characters and viewers alike, by someone who understands exactly how stories are supposed to end. There's another layer to this theory that some fans have proposed, one that's even more unsettling. What if the entire final season, not just a finale, was designed to condition us to accept the illusion? What if the pacing, the structure, the way storylines were resolved or left hanging, was all part of a larger manipulation? Season 4 was released in 2 parts. The first half built tension, escalated stakes, introduced Vecna as an unprecedented threat. Then there was a gap, a waiting period, and when the second half arrived, it continued the story but with a different energy. Things moved faster. Resolutions came quicker. The tone shifted from dread to determination, from survival to victory. What if that shift wasn't just a change in storytelling approach? What if it marked the point where the illusion began? The first half was real, or as real as the show has ever been. The second half was a dream. And we didn't notice a transition because we were too invested, too eager for the heroes to win, to question whether the victory was genuine. Now, we need to address the question that's probably been forming in your mind since the beginning of this video. If the finale is an illusion, if the characters are trapped and we've been deceived, then what is a real ending? What actually happened when the camera stopped rolling on the story we thought we knew? The darkest version of this theory suggests that Vecna won completely, that the final battle ended with him absorbing not just Max, but all of them. 11, Mike Will, Dustin, Lucas, everyone who stood against him, that their consciousnesses are now contained within his domain, living out an endless loop of the happy ending they wanted but can never truly have. Meanwhile, in the real world, Hawkins has fallen. The Upside Down has consumed it entirely. The gates didn't close. They opened wider than ever before. And humanity's last defense, the group of kids who had saved the world multiple times, is gone. This version explains why the finale feels so disconnected from reality. Because it is. It's not showing us the world. It's showing us a mental construct, a shared dream space where the characters exist in perpetual graduation day, perpetual healing, perpetual false peace. Time doesn't move forward. Consequences don't accumulate. Nothing bad can happen because nothing is actually happening. It's a recursive loop disguised as a resolution. But there's another interpretation, one that's slightly less nihilistic, but perhaps more disturbing in its implications. What if the illusion isn't total? What if some of the characters know they're trapped? What if part of their consciousness recognizes that something is wrong, but they're unable to fully break free, because doing so would mean confronting a reality too terrible to bear? Look again at certain character behaviors in the finale. The way they move, the way they speak. There's a flatness to some of their interactions, a sense that they're going through motions rather than genuinely experiencing moments. Could that be the actors giving subtle performances meant to signal disconnection? Or could it be the characters themselves, dimly aware that they're puppets in someone else's story, but unable to do anything about it? Will's character is particularly interesting in this context. He's described throughout the series as having a connection to the Upside Down that never fully breaks. He can sense the mind flare. He can feel when something is wrong. So in the finale, when he seems strangely passive, strangely accepting of the happy resolution, it's worth asking whether that's genuine contentment or enforced compliance. Is Will at peace? Or is Will trapped in a state where his ability to sense danger has been deliberately suppressed? If Will is aware, even partially, that they're in an illusion, he would be the most dangerous element of Vecna's plan. Will could potentially alert the others. He could be the crack that breaks the entire construct. So Vecna would have to ensure that Will's connection works differently inside the illusion, that instead of warning him of danger, it keeps him calm, sedated, convinced that everything is fine even when his deepest instincts are screaming otherwise. This creates a horror that goes beyond jump scares or monster attacks. It's the horror of being aware you're being controlled but lacking the ability to resist, of knowing something is wrong but being unable to articulate what or why, of watching yourself accept a false reality even as part of you recognizes it's false. That is a psychological nightmare that's far more disturbing than anything the Upside Down could throw at them physically. Let's return to the books. The Dungeons and Dragons manuals that supposedly spell out X a lie in their arrangement. Even if you're skeptical of that interpretation, even if you think fans are reading too much into a random shelf of books, consider the symbolic weight of Dungeons and Dragons in this series. It's not just a game the characters play. It's the lens through which they understand their reality, the framework that allows them to process the impossible. When they encounter a new threat, they give a name from a game: Demogorgon, Mind Flayer, Vecna. Naming the horror makes it manageable. It transforms chaos into narrative. It gives them rules to follow, weaknesses to exploit, strategies to deploy. The game becomes a survival tool, a way of maintaining sanity, when reality stops making sense. So if the game is telling them something, if the books themselves contain a message, it will be the most thematically appropriate way for the truth to surface, not through dramatic revelation or external intervention, but through the same system, they've always used to decode their world. The game is literally telling them that the dimension they're in, the reality they're experiencing, is a lie. And whether they can hear that message, whether they're capable of acting on it, becomes the real test. In Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon Master controls the game. They set the scenarios, describe the world, determine what happens when players make choices. The DM has godlike power within the game space, but their role is meant to be that of facilitator, someone who helps tell a collaborative story. A good DM guides without dictating. They create challenges but also allow genuine agency. But what if Vecna is a DM who refuses to share control? What if he's turned the entire world into his campaign? One where the players think they're making choices, but every choice leads to the outcome he's already written. The finale then becomes a scripted ending, the one he's forcing everyone to perform regardless of what they actually want or choose. This mirrors how Vecna operates within the show. He doesn't just kill, he scripts death. He pulls people into personalized nightmares and forces them to relive moments of trauma until they break. He's not just a monster. He's a director, a storyteller, someone who understands that controlling the narrative is the deepest form of control. And if the finale is his narrative, his story, his version of how things end, then the only way to defeat him is to reject that story entirely, to recognize it as false and choose to write something different, even if that means acknowledging how bad things really are outside the illusion. Here's what I need from you right now. Leave a comment telling me whether you think the finale is real or an illusion, not because I'm taking a poll, but because putting your thoughts into words forces you to commit to an interpretation. And in committing, you begin to see which evidence you find most compelling, which arguments resonate with your own understanding of the show. The act of commenting becomes an act of analysis. So do it. Tell me where you stand and why. Some fans have taken the theory even further, suggesting that there are clues embedded in the finale itself about how to break the illusion. Hidden throughout the episode, they argue, are symbols, actions, or dialogue that would function as a kind of key, a way for characters within Construct to wake themselves up if they knew what to look for. One popular candidate is music. Throughout the series, music has been established as a powerful force against the Upside Down's influence. Max uses Kate Bush's Running Up the Hill to anchor herself to reality when Vecna tries to consume her. The song becomes her lifeline, the thing that reminds her of who she is and what's worth fighting for. Music, in the world of Stranger Things, is truth, it's memory, it's connection to the real. So some fans argue that the right song, played at the right moment, could shatter the illusion that one of the characters, if they were to hear their song again, might remember that they're not supposed to be at graduation, that this isn't how their story was supposed to end. The music would cut through the false narrative the way it cut through Vecna's mental assault before. But no one plays the music. No one has the moment of recognition that breaks the spell. And that absence might be the point. Vecna has learned from his mistakes. This time, he's made sure that all the tools they used against him before, all the methods of escape, are simply not available within the illusion. The characters are trapped in a world where the solutions don't work because the world itself is designed to prevent solutions. This brings us to a crucial element of the theory that explains why it resonates with so many viewers. The Vecna illusion theory isn't just about hidden clues and suspicious details. It's about the emotional experience of watching the finale. Thousands of people, independently, without coordination, felt that something was wrong. They couldn't always articulate what. They couldn't point to a single definitive mistake or inconsistency, but they felt it. That shared feeling, that collective unease, is significant. It suggests that the finale triggered something in viewers that goes beyond normal disappointment or disagreement with creative choices. It triggered a recognition that the story we were being shown didn't match the story we'd been following. And when a narrative betrays its own internal logic, when it violates the contract as established with its audience, people notice even if they can't explain why. The Duffer Brothers are skilled storytellers. They understand tension, payoff, consequence. So for them to create a finale that feels so wrong to so many people would be either a catastrophic failure of craft or a deliberate choice. And if it's a deliberate choice, if they intentionally made the finale feel false, then the only reason to do so would be to communicate that it's false. That we're supposed to question it. That the story isn't actually over. Let's confront the elephant in the room. The Duffer Brothers and Netflix have both stated, clearly and repeatedly, that Stranger Things has ended. There is no hidden ninth episode. There is no secret continuation. The finale we received is a finale they intended. Case closed. Except that doesn't actually resolve anything. Because even if we take those statements at complete face value, even if there is no additional content coming, it doesn't change what's on screen. It doesn't change the clues that exist within the episode itself. It doesn't change the fact that the story, as presented, contains elements that suggest an intentional ambiguity about reality. Artists deny and misdirect all the time, especially when the reveal is meant to come later. But more importantly, the meaning of a work isn't solely determined by authorial intent. Once a piece of art enters a world, it generates interpretations that may exceed or contradict what the creator intended. And some of the most powerful art operates in that space of ambiguity, where multiple readings coexist and viewers are left to determine their own truth. So whether or not the Duffer Brothers intended the Vecna illusion theory, whether or not they'll ever confirm it, becomes almost irrelevant. What matters is that the text, the actual content of the episode, supports the interpretation. The clues are there. The tonal inconsistencies are there. The narrative problems are there. And viewers are responding to what they see, not what they're told to see. This is where the theory transcends being just a fan theory and becomes something more interesting. It becomes a lens through which to examine how we consume stories, how we determine what's real within fiction, and how we react when a narrative refuses to give us the clear resolution we expect. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We want happy endings. We're conditioned to expect them, especially in genre fiction where the heroes have suffered enough and earned their peace. So when a show gives us that ending, even if it doesn't quite make sense, even if it violates the show's own rules, our first instinct is to accept it, because acceptance feels better than doubt. Belief feels better than skepticism. But Stranger Things has always been a show about refusing easy comfort, about looking at the shadow in the corner and investigating instead of ignoring, about choosing truth even when truth is terrifying. So for the show to suddenly ask us to accept easy comfort, to stop questioning and just believe in a happy ending, would be a fundamental betrayal of what it's always taught us. The Vecna illusion theory, in that sense, is an act of loyalty to the show's core values. It's refusing to accept a false resolution. It's continuing to look for the monster even when we're told the monster is gone. It's recognizing that the scariest horror isn't what we see, but what we're told not to see. Now, let's consider what happens if the theory is wrong. If the finale is exactly what it appears to. B. A genuine ending where the heroes won. The town is healing and life moves on. What then? Do all the clues, all the inconsistencies, all the strange choices simply become mistakes? Oversights? Things we were never meant to notice? Possibly. But even if that's true, even if the theory is completely unfounded, it tells us something valuable about how audiences engage with stories. It tells us that when a narrative violates its own integrity, when it abandons the principles it's established over years of careful construction, people don't just accept it. They rebel. They create alternative explanations. They refuse to let the story die in a way that feels dishonest. The Vecna illusion theory is, in a way, a form of storytelling resistance. It's viewers saying, we know what this show is capable of. We've seen it deliver gut-wrenching truths and brutal consequences. We've watched it refuse easy answers again and again. So we won't let it end with an easy answer now. We'll find the complexity you're hiding or we'll create it ourselves. And maybe that's the real power of the theory. Not whether it's literally true, but what it represents. A refusal to let a story we love be diminished by a weak ending. An insistence that the narrative we follow for years deserves better than a false resolution. A commitment to keeping the questions alive even when we're told to stop asking them. There's a metatextual element here that's worth exploring. Stranger Things is a show about how stories shape reality, about how the games we play, the shows we watch, the books we read, give us the tools to understand and navigate the actual world. Dungeons and Dragons isn't just a game in this universe. It's a survival manual. The characters who take fiction seriously are the ones who survive. So, what does it mean that the fiction itself, the show we're watching, might be lying to us? What does it mean if the story we've trusted to tell us truth is now asking us to believe a comfortable lie? It means the show has turned its core theme on us. It's testing whether we've learned the lessons it's been teaching, whether we'll see through the illusion or accept it because acceptance is easier. The characters survive by refusing to accept what they were told about reality, by trusting their instincts over official explanations, by believing in the impossible when the impossible was right in front of them. And now we're being asked to do the same thing, to trust our instincts over official statements, to see the impossible truth hiding in plain sight, to recognize that the ending we were given isn't the ending the story earned. If you made it this far, if you followed every thread of this theory to its conclusion, then you understand something important. You understand that stories matter, that how they end shapes how we remember them, that a false ending can poison everything that came before. And you understand that sometimes the only way to save a story is to refuse to let it end the way it claims to. So here's what I'm asking you to do, not just for this video, but for yourself. Don't accept the finale at face value. Don't let anyone, not the creators, not the network, not other fans, tell you that what you felt watching that episode was wrong. Your unease was valid. Your questions were justified. Your refusal to be satisfied with a resolution that doesn't resolve anything was a correct instinct. The story of Stranger Things isn't over. Not because there's a secret episode coming, but because the story they gave us refuses to end. It remains open, haunted by possibilities, alive with interpretations that exceed the official narrative. And that's where the real power lies. Not in what we're told, but in what we choose to believe despite what we're told. Vecna understood that belief is the strongest prison, that if you can make someone believe they're free, they'll never try to escape. The finale tried to make us believe the story was free of its darkness, free of consequences, free of the shadows that made it what it was. But we don't have to accept that belief. We can choose to see the prison for what it is. And when enough of us see it, when enough of us refuse a comfortable lie, something shifts. The illusion loses power. The false ending cracks. And the real story, the one that was always there beneath the surface, begins to emerge. That's not just a theory about a television show. That's a principle for how we engage with any narrative that tries to tell us everything is fine when we know it isn't. How we resist false resolutions in our own lives. How we keep asking questions when we're told to stop asking. How we maintain our ability to see truth, even when lies are more appealing. Stranger Things taught us that, and if the finale is Vecna's illusion, then our refusal to accept it is exactly what Eleven, Mike, Will, and all the others would do. We're not giving up on them by questioning the ending. We're honoring them by refusing to let their story end with a lie. So no, Stranger Things isn't over, because the conversation isn't over. The questions aren't answered. The unease hasn't been resolved. And as long as we keep looking, keep questioning, keep refusing the easy answer, the story stays alive. Not in some official continuation, but in the space between what we were shown and what we know to be true. That's where the real ending lives. In the doubt, in the refusal, in the willingness to say, I see what you're trying to make me believe, and I'm choosing not to believe it. If this video changed how you see the finale, if it gave you permission to trust your instincts about what felt wrong, then I need you to subscribe. Because there are more stories like this. More narratives that try to hide their truth beneath comfortable lies. And I'm going to keep pulling them apart until we find what's real underneath. Don't let this be the last time you question what you're told to accept. Let it be the first time you commit to never stopping. The finale of Stranger Things is a lie. Not because I can prove it with absolute certainty, but because the story we were given doesn't match the story we were promised. And when that happens, when narrative betrays itself, the only honest response is to say, I don't believe you. Show me the truth, or I'll find it myself. That's where we are now, standing at the edge of an ending that refuses to feel like an ending, looking at a resolution that doesn't resolve anything, holding on to the certainty that something is wrong, even when we can't see exactly what. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the real finale isn't what we watched. It's what we do next, whether we accept the illusion or break it, whether we let the story end or keep it alive through refusal. I know what I choose, and I think you do too.